Police are laying siege to the rallying point for anti-government protests in Turkey. They are forcing protesters out of Taksim Square and pushing into the edge of Gezi Park. Police, backed by armored cars and water cannon, moved through the square earlier this morning, smashing through protesters' barricades, firing tear gas to drive back the crowds. Protesters have been fighting back, throwing stones, bottles, fireworks, and fire bombs as they tried to hold their ground against police, backed, as I said, by water cannon and armored vehicles. Now, those were scenes from earlier this morning. This is the scene live. Let's listen in as you can hear the uproar in Taksim Square. Still hundreds of protesters, still things on fire. Those are the barricades trying to keep the police and the protesters separate. But as you can see, it's not really working very well. As we look at this scene live, let me tell you that our Middle East correspondent, Sasha Petrusik, has been right in the thick of things in Taksim Square this morning. And in fact, he's live there now with me on the phone with the very latest. What are you seeing there, Sasha, now?
Well, Heather, it's much like you've described it. The most dramatic part of the scene at the moment are several tires that are on fire, casting a huge black cloud. This is being used both as a barricade to keep the police out, or to try to keep the police out, and also as a bit of a symbol of the resistance here to the police. There's been a very, very energetic group of protesters who have been throwing stones and attacking the police, often provoking them to come back with water cannon and tear gas. And sometimes the police don't need any provocation; they just move in with those things by themselves. On the other hand, the park itself has been still full of hundreds of protesters, many of whom are vowing to stay in the park. They have been peaceful. They've come out to argue with the police at times, and in one particular scene, the police almost came into the park. There was tear gas being thrown. There was a mass of helmeted police in riot gear at the edge of the park. It looked like they were trying to come in, and just a mass of protesters blocked their way and argued with them. And eventually the police pulled back. Obviously, they could have forced their way into the park. They did promise this morning that they weren't going to come into the park, but for many of the protesters, those promises don't mean much.
Some of those protesters, Sasha, are scheduled to meet tomorrow with Prime Minister Erdogan. So I'm wondering, in light of these pictures, what we're seeing right now, the upheaval and the police pushing back, does the crackdown threaten those talks at all?
Of course it does. The government has not really shown itself to be very welcoming of talks. They haven't really encouraged them. They did have some talks last week, but then the Prime Minister came home from a foreign trip and basically called all of the protesters looters and hooligans and undemocratic, and essentially said they should be leaving the park and going home right now. In fact, he repeated that demand earlier today. He certainly hasn't sent out any signals that he's willing to negotiate over the park, and his plan to recreate this area, to make a mall and a mosque instead of the park, is what, of course, triggered this whole protest and got everybody riled up. But, of course, it's spread now throughout all of Turkey, and many people are demonstrating against a government that they see as being undemocratic, being too autocratic, passing laws that they don't want, and most of all, not giving them a voice. That every time that somebody disagrees with the government, they say the police get thrown at them, and the tear gas goes up and the water cannons do. And at least today, they seem to be right.
Sasha, thank you for this, and we'll be back to you as events change. Again, looking live there at the scene, the black cloud of smoke rising from that burning barricade there in Taksim Square in Turkey. Sasha Petrusik, our reporter on the story.